In the last video on my 300SD, you got to see that the rust issue checked out okay. This is really quite an amazing W116 as far as rust is concerned. But what about this body damage here? This car got hit pretty hard. And I know some of you are thinking, you can fix it, come on. Anything is fixable. Well, that's true. Anything is fixable. I will be the first to admit that. But you have to ask the question, is it economically fixable? And is it reasonably fixable? You know, if this were a Pagoda, a W113 or some rare model, you would be looking at this damage a lot differently than I am looking at it because it's a W116 300SD. I'm not saying this isn't a cool car and it shouldn't be saved from the crusher, but who's going to pay? Who's the one that is paying and the effort involved in going? Not just people out there voting, yeah, I can't fix it. But who's vested, okay? So we're going to take a look at this damage a little more closely. And when I got the car up on the lift and was checking out the rust, I also found out that this car has had some previous damage, okay? You already got to see the damage on the hood in part one, and there's so much Bondo in this hood that I would never attempt to fix it. These are aluminum hoods. And if any of you try to do body work on aluminum, particularly when it gets stretched, you are going to chase your tail until the chickens come home, okay? So when I have an aluminum hood that's damaged, I don't even bother. I know anything is fixable. Once again, as far as time, I just happen to have a very nice 116 hood here in my used part stock. So the hood's going to get changed out, but there were a couple other areas that I discovered, and it's primarily because I got the car up in the air and I could look up into the light and see them. I missed them when I was looking at the car in the rain, and this is a good reason why you want to be careful about checking cars out in bad weather and rain. I speak from experience. You bring it home, and when everything dries off, you go, oh man, I didn't see that. So just be careful, all right? That was going to be the deciding factor for me purchasing this car. Once again, I'm looking at a go, no go point where this car becomes too expensive, too much time, too much effort to fix as opposed to what it's worth. It's just not a love affair. You have to be practical about it, at least I do, because my time is limited. I know if there's somebody out there that has all the time in the world to fix this, you might want to tackle it, but I can't look at it that way, okay? So I'm looking at this damage here. I spotted this other evidence of previous damage on the car. Let me show you that now. Let me explain some of the things you want to look for when you're trying to determine if the car's had any repaint on it at all. You can get really fooled, particularly if you're looking at a car in the rain, and so is the case with this 300SD. I did not notice this right here until I got this car home and got up on the lift. That's why when you're checking for body damage and body repaint, I found it's better to get down on the ground and look up into the light. You can't imagine how many times I've got a car home here, I pulled a customer's car and put it up on the lift, and I see things that I've never seen outside. Because outside you're looking down with the light, here I'm looking up at the light, and sure enough, right here, I'm spotting little bubbles. Now those bubbles are indicative of auto body plastic behind the paint lifting away from the metal. So not only has there been some repair work done here, but it's very poor paint work. The other thing I look for is crazing or minor, very fine cracking in the paint. And I can show you that there. So we've got a situation here now where the hood has been repainted, and you saw that damage. The left front fender has been repainted, and it's been blended into the left front door. This has been repainted here, and it's been blended in right up here because I can see minor crazing. When I say crazing, it's like minor cracks. This is usually due to poor prep, poor surface preparation, poor sealing, and cheap paint, okay? But I see all these minor little cracks, and of course I can see it's just been blended out into this area. So that front end damage is not the only damage that this car has incurred during its life. So when you get one of these cars, it's real important you look at it over real closely. I'm not sure if this damage is going to have an impact on my decision, but it is going to impact the amount of work. Because now I've either got to replace this door or I've got to grind out all this old bad bodywork that somebody did a number of years ago and redo this. That's just another, 10 hours of work, okay? So all these things start adding up, and that's when you start wondering, okay, is it really going to be worth it to fix this car? It's yet to be determined. This thing is kind of teetering on the teeter-totter, so to speak. Okay, I know you're saying, well, Ken, that's easy. Just replace the door. Get another door and put it on there. But you have to take the door all apart. You have to paint it because you're never going to find one in this mist green here, okay? And it's another thing to do. Once again, anything is fixable. But when I saw that other damage, that's kind of putting some weight on one end of the scale that I wasn't expecting, okay? So I want you to look at this. I'll show it to you up more closely here in a second, but I want to talk about a couple things I look for when I see this type of damage and I think about whether or not I want to repair the car. First off, I do not want to do a frame pull. I do not want to get this on a frame straightening machine and have to start yanking on it. That's too costly and too much work. So it has to be the type of damage that's missed the frame rails, has not bent the frame down there. And the other thing is, I don't like to repair cars that have been hit in the wheel and have bent the front or rear suspension. There was one car I got a number of years ago. I got fooled on it. It had some damage in the back, and it wasn't too bad, and I fixed it. And when I got it all fixed, I found out the thing wouldn't align because apparently when the car spun out in the accident, it came up and hit the curb, and the curb bent that rear trailing arm. Now, once again, that was fixable, but it was something that I hadn't counted on, and it was a real surprise. So I'm going to tell you right now, be sure and make certain the suspension has not been hit, even if you have to get the car to a good alignment shop and check for all four-wheel alignment, okay? Because I saw that damage on the rear door there. This car could have been pushed into a curb, and I don't know the history of that particular damage on the door, but I guarantee you that body filler is pretty thick on there. And when I start grinding that out, maybe in a later episode I'll show you, I'll grind some of that body filler out and let you see what it's like, because somebody did a really poor job on that door. I'm looking at this, and looking down in here, it looks like the whole inner fender panel, all the way back to the shock tower, has been crumpled. And that's the other thing you need to check very closely is the top of the shock tower. If the top of the shock tower has moved, and you could either do that, you can have a professional do that on at a body shop, but you can take some critical measurements, and you can determine whether the top point of the shock has moved aft. And if that's the case, I won't repair it. I'm going to pass. So you see, if the frame's been pushed back, I'm going to pass. If the suspension is bent, the evidence the tire's been hit, I'm going to pass. If the top of the shock tower has moved, I'm going to pass. So how do I determine that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this fender off, and we'll talk about how we do that in a later episode. I'm going to get the fender off, and I'm going to cut out the damaged area. And at the same time, I'm going to start looking for a parts car. But my goal at this point will be to get a fender on here. I'm not even going to weld in a new inner fender panel. When I get this opened up, I'll come back and show you exactly where I'll cut it and where I'll do the welding. I haven't decided whether I'm going to need a full core support or just weld it at this point and get this whole inner fender panel all up right forward of the shock absorber tower and weld that in. But I'm not going to do that now. Let me explain why. I'm just going to get a fender on it. I'm going to get it cut out, get it straight enough. I'll get something in there that'll hold the headlight because I want the car to be legal, and then I want to drive it. And in the next video, you'll find out the second reason I want to drive it. The first reason is I want to see how it feels at speed. I want to see how the steering feels, and then I'm going to drive it and take it to an alignment shop before I do any welding, before I put a lot of money into it. So all I need at this point is a fender and a headlight. I think I've got those in my old stock. And I'll get this car just roadworthy, okay? And then I'm going to go check alignment, because let me tell you, you don't want to be doing this type of repair and putting all this effort and money into fixing this type of body damage and then find out later that the car won't align. This has happened. I've heard about it. It hasn't happened to me, but I know some friends that it's happened to. So this is something you need to be very careful about when you're approaching this type of damage. So that's the big reason why I want to get this thing roadworthy, is to see how it feels in terms of steering and handling, and also to get it so I can drive it into an alignment shop. And now there's another reason I want to get this out on the road, and you're going to see that in the next part in this series.